So welcome to the third annual IET Defence Professional Networking event, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming along today. Just a quick advert for the IET. The IET is, in my opinion, the very best STEM and engineering association to join in Australia, in fact around the world. Our headquarters is in London, and we provide professional accreditation services that are recognised globally. As chair of the IET SANT, I'd like to welcome you all today and thank our sponsors, in particular GHD, but also not to forget the IET's headquarters in London, who funds us, and the Australian Forum, which has also provided us with funds to support today. Thanks to our interstate and international guests for joining us to hear our four impressive speakers. We've got a gentleman here from Korean Shipyards waiting to hear about Australia's first digital shipyards. As your MC, I'm honoured to introduce each of our speakers today. They're all particularly interesting people, each coming from a different Australian location to give their talk. And I must say that I spoke with Christopher Pine at the recent opening of the Naval Shipbuilding College, and he sends his apologies for not being able to open today's event. Let me introduce our first speaker. Our keynote speaker today originally comes from Melbourne, but now calls Adelaide his home after marrying a very strong South Australian lady. I won't tell you too much about her because that would take another 15 minutes. For most people, having 6 children would consume a significant part of their time at the end of their day, but Jim seems to be able to manage a great family life while making time for one or two other passions. Jim graduated from the Defence Force Academy with a Bachelor of Science with a physics major. He graduated as a pilot in 1988 and commenced flying Caraboos, helicopters and fighters from 91 through 2000. Jim went to the Empire Test Pilot School in 95, flying everything from passenger jets to Harriers. Upon returning to Adelaide, Jim was doing a lot of test flight work with F-18s out at RAF Argy. Jim left the Air Force formally in 2000, although remained flying with the RAF Reserve until around 2012. In 2000, Jim founded Nova Systems with Peter Nikoloff and became Nova's first CEO. Currently, Nova has around 600 employees and operates in various countries around the world, including Australia, the US, the UK, France, Germany, Norway, New Zealand and Singapore. Jim sits on several boards, including Adelaide Arts Festival, the Sir Roth and Keith Smith Trust Advisory Board, the National Board of the American Chamber of Commerce, the Council of the University of South Australia, Australian Naval Infrastructure, and is the former chair of the DTC, the former deputy chair of the Repat Hospital Association, now called the Road Home. Jim is a former Aussie rules player. He jogs to keep fit and loves skiing. Jim has 2 real passions. The first is for flying. The second is for creating great Australian technology companies. I very much look forward to hearing Jim's talk today, which will cover 3 topics. First, a little bit of Jim's history from himself. Second, SMEs and how to make them work. And third, his work as South Australia's Chief Entrepreneur. Please welcome Jim to the stage.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, my fellow Novans, whatever my fellow Novans got, I've got a couple here, John, Mike, Jamil, I think we did have a Ben Sanders, but he's not here. Thanks very much for having me. I hope I will keep you a little bit entertained for the next 30 or 40 minutes or so, and hopefully a little bit of knowledge or a few ideas for you to take home. I'm going to talk a little bit about my own personal history. The reason I'm going to do that is I think that's a fair part of the story behind Nova, and I guess my drive and my passion for what I'm doing now as Chief Entrepreneur, but also the drive, or my drive and passion about creating great Australian technology companies. So there'll be a few little stories, a few little anecdotes, but let me start. You'll see on the left-hand side, that's me as a very young, good-looking fighter pilot and test pilot at the Empire Test Pilot School I've aged considerably. The guy on the right-hand side is a gentleman named David Best, who was a squadron leader at that time, finished up as an Air Commodore in the Royal Air Force, and was the Royal Air Force's Chief Test Pilot. Dave is one of our senior managers in one of our UK companies, but the really, really disappointing thing is he looks exactly the same now as he does in the photo. I'm the one that's deteriorated. So, talk about this bit of history, story of Nova, defence industry and SME challenges. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Office of the Chief Entrepreneur and Lot 14, the old Royal Adelaide Health School site, for those of you that are not familiar with it, and what we're trying to achieve down there. Let me start. In this photo, sorry for those of you over the other side, but just on the under the propeller, just to the right of centre, is my father, and he's sitting in front of a CAC Boomerang, which I will chat about a little bit later. But the CAC Boomerang was Australia's only designed and built fighter aircraft that ever saw combat. And the miraculous story of the Boomerang was that it was designed and built in 5 months. So December 7th, 1941, Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Australia had no fighters. We had P-40 Kitty Hawks on order from the Americans. That order was cancelled, understandably, I guess. But that goes to conversations we'll have later about defence sovereignty. The government went to the Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation and said, hey, can you build us a fighter? You know, we are desperate. The Japanese are coming down the Malay Peninsula, and things are not good. The Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation said to the government, look, we really don't know. And they said, well, think about it. They met in January of 1942, 4 weeks after Pearl Harbor attacks, and they said, oh, we think we can do it. And the government said, right, go ahead, go and build this fighter. And 5 months later, it did its first flight. So from build me a fighter to first flight was 5 months. And that represents what Australia can do when it really puts its mind to it, and what engineers and technologists can do in this country when we are given the opportunity to do so. It's an important part of what drives me and what I think needs to drive us into the future. Dad there again, the P-51D Mustang. This time the Americans did come through a little bit late. That's Mount Stewart behind at Townsville, and he's the guy with the cap sitting under the guy in the cockpit. Obviously a bit staged, because mostly when you're having a brief you don't do it in the dirt, even during World War II. And the guy who's sitting up in the cockpit with a parachute on doesn't look as though he's paying much attention. Then again, the P-40 Kitty Hawks finally did arrive several months later, and again flying out of Port Island, northern Queensland into New Guinea. Rightio, another young, good-looking guy there. At age, I think I was 22 there, and I had just graduated from my pilot's course. So straight out of school, Dad, partly the inspiration, always wanted to be a pilot in the Air Force, and Dad died when I was 9 years old. So part of that, I guess, disappeared, but I had a whole lot of friends of my family who sort of took over that surrogate father role and looked after me, and many of those had a military background, 2 in particular, one who had been a commanding officer of one of the SAS units in Vietnam, and another one who had flown, Jeff Cousins, who had flown with my dad, who was my godfather, and looked after me. So straight into the Air Force Academy at Point Cook, finally finished up at the Defence Academy in Canberra for the first year to graduate from there, with a science degree and a science degree with a physics major. Then off to pilot's course, and basically about that's the end of 1988 when I graduated pilot's course. So young, fresh-faced Air Force pilot with the world in front of him. The mighty Caribou. So I was a bit disappointed. I always wanted to fly fighters, so I was a bit disappointed when I got sent to Caribous. The guy who was in the previous photo, Pete Sterling, was the guy that sent me there. He said, you need a break. You've had 5 years of working pretty hard, and I had a great time flying Caribous. It was slow, but it was a pretty impressive sort of World War II almost generation of aircraft. Many of the aircraft we had actually flown in Vietnam and still had little discs from the bullet holes and water holes when bombs had gone off. So people would go up the aircraft, and there were these little discs that they used to patch the holes with, and you would say these are bullet holes and waters, and people did honestly not believe me, but real history. A couple of big R2000 radial engines, basically about 30 litre engines, 14-cylinder engines. They weren't the most reliable things. And I've subsequently spent a bit more time behind those radial engines subsequently. Always wanted to fly fighters, and I'd done reasonably well on pilot's course, and they had said to me, go for caribous for a couple of years, have a break, and then go on to fighters. And eventually I get to live the dream. So once again, young fighter pilot up at 75 Squadron. I was based in the Northern Territory at Tyndall, which is a great place to fly if you're a fighter pilot, because there was nothing around and you could blast along at 500 feet going at Mach 1.2, and no one really complained too much except for the kangaroos and the cattle. But great sport, lots of deployments to Singapore and all those sorts of things, so a lot of fun. Rightio, same photo again. This is test flight school. So I did my operational tour at 75 Squadron, and then fortuitously was selected to go to test flight school in the UK to the quaintly named Empire Test Flight School, which still exists today and is in fact the original test flight school. Really fantastic year. I got to fly everything from Jaguars there to BAC 111 passenger jets, 127 passenger jets, to helicopters, to ultralights. It was just absolutely magic. Never worked so hard in my entire life, but certainly from a pilot's point of view, probably the culmination of a professional career, and a great privilege to have not only gone there, but actually made it and graduated. Came back to Adelaide. Now, I will say now, I had not the slightest interest in coming to Adelaide. So I'm a Melbourne boy, born and bred. Dad had actually been Lord Mayor of Melbourne in the 1970s, but as I say, died when I was quite young. Had not necessarily left a lot for my mother, so she struggled a reasonable amount. But lived in the city, very little interest in coming to Adelaide, and put that in the context that I'd been living in Katherine for the 3 years prior to coming here. I will tell you now, I am an absolute convert to this city. I think we have one of the best places in the world to live in. We are consistently in the top 10 most livable world cities. We are big enough but small enough to get stuff done. And again, I'll talk a little bit about this later on. But people in South Australia need to realise how good we have it here. And with that goes a responsibility to go and do something with it and make this place even greater and give our kids some opportunity as well. So, based out at the Air Force Base at Edinburgh, doing all sorts of things. I was a pretty peaceful sort of person, so we used to paint our bombs pink. Get to my sensitive side. There's a couple of 2,000 pounders there. The great thing about the F-18, it literally carries as much as a World War II B-17 that had sort of 10 or 12 crew. So you combine that with laser guided, or with the latest guidance, all that sort of stuff, and you have a pretty potent piece of pretty potent capability. So great aeroplane to fly, absolutely loved it. Will be surpassed even more by the Joint Strike Fighter, but obviously the Hornet's still flying today. Had great fun at RG, worked on everything from putting night vision goggles in the F-18, so literally landing at Woomera in pitch black without any lighting at all, which was pretty interesting. New radar systems, lots of weapons trial. I had a world record for a period there that I can't tell you about because it was a top secret project. And no one knows about it, but it was pretty cool for a while. So really great fun. And I guess for me also my first exposure to defence industry, to the defence acquisition and procurement process, and also I think to what Australia could do in terms of their technology. So one of the jobs I had when I was flying F-18s was modifying the cockpit for night vision goggles. So for those of you that have had anything to do with these sorts of things, the most significant cost of having a night vision goggle compatible aeroplane is changing all the lighting and displays so that they operate outside the spectral response. I'm talking to engineers, so I'm going to use words like spectral response and assume you will understand. So changing the lighting and displays so that they are outside the spectral response of the actual goggles. So the goggles can see outside, but because the lighting and stuff in the cockpit is outside the spectral response, it does not impede on the goggles. It's not like having a spotlight shine into your face. Anyway, I was going to do this, and I got this file, and when I first arrived back at Ardu, and they talked about the fact that we needed to go to the US and Boeing or McDonnell Douglas would do this, and they were going to charge us $350,000 US an aircraft to do it, which even now is significant, but then 22 years ago it was just ridiculous, and the Air Force had just said we can't afford this, can't do it. I went round to a whole lot of my mates who were flying helicopters at the time and said, we modified all your stuff, you didn't pay this sort of money for your helicopters, because helicopters are reasonably worthless pieces of equipment, and you wouldn't waste that money. I mean, the helicopters would be worth worthless than $350,000. So I should point out now, actually, I do actually have a commercial helicopter licence as well. I believe in aviation equality. I fly fixed wing and rotary wing, but I just can't tell you my fighter pilot mates because. Anyway, went to these guys and said, oh yeah, we've got these companies doing this sort of stuff in Australia. I went to this company called Australian Defence Products, and I said, look, you guys work on helicopters, so you won't know much about fast jets, and obviously the people that fly them are pretty impressive, and the aeroplanes are even more impressive. You won't have the technology or the ability to do anything. And he said, yeah, yes, we will. I said, oh, okay. So come and have a look. Anyway, these guys, a small Australian company, came in, they prototyped the whole cockpit for less than $100,000. And we finally, a couple of years later, got that in production, and we produced a really, really good mod. And that was the first time that I actually realised that Australian companies could do anything they wanted as well as anywhere else in the rest of the world. And defence in particular, I was part of the problem at the time, would just say, oh no, just buy it from the Americans, just buy it from the Americans. It was just the really easy solution to go through FMS, foreign military sales. So that was in part, I guess, the driver for starting Nova. Now, at the time I was at Ardu, at the Aircraft Research and Development Unit out at Edinburgh. I'd started doing an MBA when I was up in the Territory, because I always figured I would stay in the Air Force, I would become Chief of Air Force, and maybe Chief of Defence Force one day. I had only small ambitions for power. And anyway, I decided to do an MBA because there weren't many fighter pilots at that time that had MBAs, and I just thought that would be useful, and I could go and argue with public service and beat them about the head with my MBA and tell them how smart I am, and that would help me progress things. What subsequently happened is that, so I finished the MBA in about 99, but in about 1996, I had been taken on a blind date. So I left my first wife in the UK, we'd split up. She had a very significant career, and we just decided to go our separate ways, all very, very amicable. Came back here, had a year of being a single bachelor, which was great fun because it was flying around in a fast-moving $40 million pickup machine. I owned an 84 Daihatsu Charade at the time as well, which all the girls were seriously impressed by. And ended up on a blind date with my wife, or I'm going to say my current wife, she's the only wife. Melinda O'Leary. Anyway, Linda obviously, when she met me, fell in love with me. And pursued me relentlessly. She had from a previous marriage, and I thought, the right thing to do was marry her and look after it. Anyway, so the problem I had then was she couldn't move from Adelaide because of 3 kids, and her ex who lived here, who was a great guy, I have a great relationship with, Peter. And so I was like, choose wife or choose Air Force. Having sacrificed first life to the Air Force, I thought it would be careless to lose a second. So I was then in the position of what do I do, and what can I do for a career? Anyway, I graduated from the MBA program at about the time this was happening, and I'd done an entrepreneurship program for no other reason than the fact that I had a whole lot of mates on my MBA course who'd said, oh, we're going to go do an entrepreneurship program, why don't you come with us? And I said, oh, what's entrepreneurship, and how do you spell it? And they said, don't worry, just come along, it'll be fun. And it's like, oh, okay, I should have probably looked up the dictionary, it would have helped. Anyway, so I turned up with this entrepreneurship class, did a few group assignments, all went reasonably well. And at the end of the unit, the professor said, right, you're all going to do an assignment on a business, and I want you to think of a business opportunity. And I did my MBA part-time, so occasionally I'd turn up in class 4:30 down at Adelaide Uni in a flying suit covered in sweat, patches and all this sort of stuff. And I said to the professor, "Oh, look, Professor, you can tell, you know, I'm actually not an entrepreneur, I'm a fighter pilot, and I'm going to be the chief of the Air Force, so this is really a bit of a waste of my time. I'm just doing this because my friends are here. Couldn't you just give me another Harvard business?" Well, he didn't like that for some reason. But he said, you know, "Couldn't you just give me a Harvard Business School case study?" And he said, no, I want you to think of something, Jim. You know, it's an entrepreneurship class. And he said, "Look, go and have a good thing. I'm sure you can think of some business." Anyway, I subsequently came back the next week and said, "Look, Professor, I've been working hard on this, just racking my brains. I'm going to be the chief of the Air Force. And I don't know, you know, can't we just do a deal? You know, and a case study, I'll do it fine." He said to me, "Jim, this is an entrepreneurship class. Think of something or fail." I said, "Oh, okay, now I get the message." Anyway, at the time, and I won't go through the whole story because we run out of time, but basically at the time, in very, very short order, Defence had been civilising a lot of its operations, and one of the issues we had when I was at the test establishment was when we brought in subcontractors to work on some of the test programs, they usually worked for some of the major OEMs, you know, the Boeings, the BAEs, the Raytheons and all that, and they were often the manufacturers of the equipment with which we were testing, all competitors, so it was just inappropriate to have them working on the equipment. So I ended up writing this business plan about a company that provided independent flight test services. It only did work for the Commonwealth. It was independent of the primes and could provide all that sort of support. Subsequently, I did okay on the MBA. Obviously, as with most MBA assignments and engineering assignments, with which you're all familiar, you park it on the shelf and think you'll go and look at it 20 years later, and you don't. Eventually, your wife comes along and tries to throw it all out. You say, "I'm sentimentally attached to that." Anyway, all those documents were parked on my shelf, and Bill Ardrey, the entrepreneurship lecturer, who didn't like me to start with, decided I was okay. And after I graduated, I used to catch up with him for lunch, and I said to him, "Look, I'm leaving the Air Force now. You know, some company in Adelaide, I haven't chosen which one yet, is going to have the great good fortune to employ me." And I said to him, "Well, which one do you think I should give that opportunity to?" Now, he turned around to me and said, "Jim, I hate to burst your bubble, but no one's going to give you a job. All you're capable of doing is dropping bombs on people and shooting aeroplanes out of the sky." I was like, "Oh, okay." I said, "Are you serious?" He said, "I'm deadly serious." He's like, "No one's going to look at you." I said, "I'm an MBA and, you know, I'm brilliant, good looking as well." And I said, "I'm not going to hack it." So I said, "What do I do? I don't really want to be a Qantas pilot." He said, "What happened to that assignment you wrote?" I said, "What assignment?" He said, "That final assignment." I said, "I don't know, it's on the shelf somewhere." And he said, "Was it true or did you make it all up?" I said, "No, it's true." And he said, "Well, why don't you start that company?" And I went, "Oh, duh." So that was the start of Nova Systems. And subsequently, I swapped my flying suit. In fact, the other reason I had to leave the Air Force, the guy on the immediate right is a guy named Pete Budd, who's still a good-looking mate of mine. He was the best-looking fighter pilot the Air Force ever produced. As soon as he came into the test establishment, all the media attention went away from me. So that was the other impetus for me to leave as well. And the annoying thing about Pete is he's still that good-looking.
Yeah.
Rightio. So I started a company. And because I didn't have my wife, Melinda, is on the right hand side of the picture, on my left hand side in the orangey caftan. Because I didn't know anything but the military, when Pete Nicol and I started the organisation, started Naval, we said, well, every organisation which we know anything about has uniforms, so we'll have to have a uniform. We couldn't think of anything in particular. So we stole the other uniform we used to have in the flight test establishment, which was the safari suit. The safari suit will appear again soon. There I was, I was starting to get a bit of grey hair there, but that's about 2000 when we first started. I managed to get myself snuck out of the flight line and take a photo. So the company has subsequently grown, as we talked about before, to about 600 people. Started out of flight test and engineering. And has expanded into, we did this before, Jamil helped me out here if I muck it up. We're in satellite communications, we're obviously in defence across aerospace, maritime, land, we're in cyber, we're in oil and gas, we're in autonomous vehicles, help me out, there's a few other things there. Anyway, we're into a lot of things and we are operating, we've got people in all those countries we mentioned before, but 3 companies in the UK, one in Norway, one in Singapore and one in New Zealand. So despite the incompetence of senior management, the company has done okay. I talked before about safari suits. They have multiplied, and that is the official, unofficial uniform of Nova. And all jokes aside, one of the things about the safari suit has been it is a real cultural icon in our company, and it does three things. Number one, if you are out with a group of people walking down Hindley Street and the rest of them are in safari suits and you're in a safari suit, you are unlikely to split off by yourself and wander Hindley Street alone. And the other thing it does is you don't take yourself too seriously. So when your CEO is walking around in a safari suit, it's pretty easy for the youngest grad to come up to him after he's had a few beers and poke him in the chest and tell him all the things he's doing wrong or who they're doing wrong. And that has actually been a major strength of Nova. The fact that whilst we come out of the military and there is a popular misconception that the military is very hierarchical in high performance units like flight test units, special forces units, combat ships, submarines, all those sorts of things. There is actually a relatively flat structure, and whilst there is rank, everyone's opinion is highly valued and appreciated, and the reason it is, the youngest corporal on the flight line has saved my bum on several occasions when I've been about to take off in an unserviceable jet with a piece of equipment that's either going to explode or come off and really do some serious damage. So that's been a lot of premise behind it. In great companies, when you hit 10 years, obviously you get a Rolex or something like, I'm sure in all of your companies, you get a $20,000 or $30,000 watch at the 10-year point in your careers. We decided to go one better than that. We actually have gold safari suits that are custom made at 10 years, and there's you might be able to see a few of them there as well. Okay, we've had some great achievements, ARW, Fast 100s, most innovative companies in the world. But the thing the thing I'm most proud of is that 7 of the last 9 years we have been in the top 30 best places to work in Australia, and last year we were the 10th best place to work in Australia. I think that says a lot about culture and a lot about the spirit of our organisation, and it is one of the fundamental reasons we have achieved as much as we've achieved. Rightio. Challenges and opportunities for SMEs. So I'm going to just shift focus a little bit here. One of the advantages I think I had, or Pete and I had when we started Nova, was that we had been in defence for a long time. The disadvantage of that was I knew absolutely nothing about business, and I was really lucky that both my wife Melinda and Pete Nicole's wife Cal were actually quite distinguished business people in their own rights, and helped us through. I think for a lot of small companies coming into the defence area, particularly if they've not worn a uniform or if they haven't been involved in that sector, it's really thick in culture and communication and acronyms and all those sorts of things and expectations. And I think one of the things that SMEs face often is they just do not understand how defence works. And they don't understand the mentality of defence, and they often don't understand the mentality of the primes as well. And they are quite distinct cultures, and it takes a long time to work it all out. As I say, if you're embedded in it from an early age, you've got half a chance, but if not, it can be a real challenge. And the more the SMEs can mix with people that have worn a uniform or mix with the primes in social environments, in any sort of environments, through things like defence teaming centres, through collaborations, all those sorts of things, the more effective they will be, and the better the communication, the better that understanding will be. And most importantly, the greater the trust will be from people in a uniform and people in the primes that those SMEs are going to do a good job. There is still, and I'm pleased to say it's really improved, but there is still a level of mistrust of people in uniform towards industry. I'm really pleased to say that that is changing. I think full credit to, in particular, one of our own politicians, Christopher Pyne, who has really pushed defence hard to engage with Australian industry and deserves a lot of credit for the fact that we are now working far more closely. There's a chance for defence and non-defence clients. I spoke to a lot of people that have been, for example, in the automotive industry, and then have decided, right, automotive is going down and we're now going into the defence sector. They are totally different industries with totally different expectations. And once you make that election, or make that decision to change into defence, there is a whole amount of administration, organisation, structure, quality control, pricing, all sorts of things like that, that there is a fair chance that if you put that all into your organisation, you will be no longer competitive in some of those other industries like automotive or others. The standards, whether they're right or wrong for aerospace, maritime, and a lot of land vehicles, are very high, and that is why, a toilet on a P3 Orion costs, $15,000 or something stupid, and we all laugh at that, and even I laugh at it. But the whole regulatory process and the compliance process for doing work in defence is major overhead, and that drives your competitiveness down in lots of other industries, particularly business and consumer type industries, and even, as I say, business like automotive. There's obviously the challenges of cash flow in defence. There is a real issue often of hurry up and wait. So you will think that there are big defence contracts coming over the horizon, and the money's there, and there are big dollars involved in defence. But often there are delay upon delay upon delay upon delay. And for small companies, if you don't have other work for your people or for your machines and bits and pieces like that, then you will have a real issue supporting cash flow. And obviously, the difficulty of that is, as I mentioned before, if you're trying to do stuff in automotive and other industry and other areas, and defence, it's going to be a real challenge. So for a lot of companies that come in, a lot of SMEs that decide to come into the defence industry, the best advice often is don't. If you've got a good market and you've got a good business, defence can be really challenging sometimes, and not necessarily a great place to be. I think one of the things I'm particularly passionate about is the topic of leadership and management. I think we often find for SMEs that there is lots of support for, and government support for, apprenticeships, for technical training, for engineering training, degrees and all that sort of stuff. When you go and try and get support for leadership and management courses, sending people to do business degrees, sending people to Harvard University or Stanford or Australian Graduate School of Management, that's where the money dries up. I think one of the fundamental challenges for us as a defence industry and for SMEs in terms of our growth